Now, perhaps you've heard that murder is messy, but this mess is in a different way. And the question is, could it be that the prosecution is making such a mess about the mess that they might lose the jury and set an alleged murder free? Well, today we're going to talk about the Murdaugh murder mess. Talk about that and a whole lot more on Charlie Crimebuster, what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those solely of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Today we're going to talk about the Murdaugh murder mess. And boy, is it a mess. You talk about the twists and turns on this one. Wow. We're going to get into that in just a moment, but first let me take a moment to welcome you to the podcast. Every week we have new listeners, and we appreciate each and every one of you. I'd love for you to reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. And as always, we invite your suggestions on the podcast and suggestions on other topics to cover in the podcast. We invite your questions, and we even invite you to disagree with some of our comments or some of our own opinions. It's a safe place for you to voice your disagreement. Again, reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Now, there are some people who say they'd like to support the program. We appreciate that. That would be helpful. You can do that by becoming a badge, B-A-D-G-E supporter. Go to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. You can become a part of the program by supporting it as a badge supporter for as little as $3 a month. Not only do you support the program, but you help us help others. You help us help the great heroes of our nation. That is, the law enforcement people, the first responders, the firemen, the medics, and the military. All these people out there putting their lives on the line to save ours. Learn how you can become a badge supporter today. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Hey, we're going to put that in the show notes. You can just click on the link. Also going to put that Gmail address there so you can talk to us directly by email. And we're going to also put our podcast website, charliecrimebuster.com, there. It's all going to be on the show notes, easy for you just to click there. Hey, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that on your favorite podcast platform. And when you get a moment, leave us a 5-star. Give us some attaboys by hitting that 5 stars on that wonderful report, okay? Well, now we're going to get back into our program today, and I'm just going to start it out by saying, my friend, you just can't make this stuff up. Now, before we get into that, though, I want to take just a moment to share with you our crazy crook story. I try to always share a crazy crook story to get you to smile a little bit, and to lighten the load of some of the heavy stuff that we often cover on the program. And so we're going to be talking about our crazy crook story today that actually happened, believe it or not, at a restaurant. Now, I'm sure if you keep your ear to the air, your eyes online, you have perhaps realized, as I have, that restaurants in the past few years, well, they've been the scene of quite a few situations where the police have to be called. Hey, there have even been times when someone has assaulted a worker because the fries were too cold. And other times, someone assaulted a worker because they were out of a certain food. And there are times when people have actually been killed over such foolish things. The list goes on and on. Well, I'm afraid, folks, we probably need to get the word out, don't you think? Let's give these workers, these restaurant workers, a break from the insanity. You see, most are doing jobs that some of us would not do. And all these places are short-staffed, lots of pressure to work quickly, and sometimes, they make mistakes. Now, the next time your order isn't right, why don't you take a breath, maybe count to 10, and just request politely that they correct it. You do not have to curse them out. You do not have to threaten their jobs. Nobody likes that. Or you don't have to commit a crime. And I say commit a crime, well, because the restaurant is the very place of our crazy crook story this week. It takes place right near us in Gainesville, Florida. You see there a lady, she decided to perform her hold-up. Well, she decided to hold up an Arby's restaurant. Yep, that's right. So she comes to the restaurant, sticks it up, robs it, scares the lives out of everybody in the restaurant, and then she goes to make her getaway. Yep, she makes her getaway. But in all things, she tries to make her getaway in a taxi. That's right. She tried to get away in a taxi. Well, my friend, it did not take long for the Gainesville Police Department to swoop her up, arrest her, take her to jail. So, my friend, you would think if you wanted to get away from the po-po, you would think you just might not use a taxi to do it. So that, my friend, is our Charlie Crimebuster crazy crook story of the week. Now on to our main focus. While here in the United States we've been blowing things out of the sky, that thing about the China spy balloon, and, interesting enough, 2 more unidentified objects was flying over American and Canadian skies. Well, we blew them out of the sky as well. And so while we've been blowing up things out of the sky, things have also been heating up in the Alex Murdaugh trial. That's up there in Waterboro, South Carolina. We're in week 3 of that double murder trial now. And boy, it was a crazy week filled with a lot of events. It included a bomb threat. There was a motion for a mistrial, even a GoFundMe controversy involving 2 of the state's key witnesses. And then the family members, even the Murdaugh family members were threatened to be thrown out of court. So, we're back to it, man. The Murdaugh trial, the Murdaugh murder mess is what I'm calling it, and you'll see why as you listen. You see, Murdaugh now, he's standing trial for the June 7, 2021 killings of his wife Maggie and his younger son Paul. And, looks like later he's going to be standing trial for around 100 financial and drug-related crimes as well. Well, this murder trial, though, it began on January the 23rd. Probably go all the way through February. I'm going to predict it's going a little longer than through February, based on what I've seen so far. Now, to date, the state, they've already called 46 witnesses. And they've already introduced around 400, that's 400 exhibits of evidence. And talk about a bombshell moment, try this one on for size. This past Wednesday around 12:30, the judge, Clifton Newman, he ordered the courtroom to be evacuated. And then the South Carolina Law Enforcement Department, called SLED, they later confirmed that it was a result of a bomb threat. That's right, a bomb threat. The South Carolina Attorney General's office, they confirmed that threat was quote-unquote phoned in. Well, of course, not only did they evacuate the entire courthouse, but Murdaugh, he was taken from the courthouse and seen being driven from the people around. They saw him driven in a large black van. That was according to the reports from the journalists, all the media that was outside the courthouse. But it didn't take long. Court resumed around 3:07 Wednesday, after law enforcement, of course, cleared the building. Then, not only did that happen, but there was also a motion for mistrial. A motion for mistrial. The defense attorneys, they're saying, the prosecution's violating the rights of their client. That the prosecution is causing prejudice to the jury. That's with all that character information they're sharing with the jury involving his financial misconduct. Oh, to be sure, my friend. If you listen to them, he is a sleazy guy who stowed funds from his client's family's firm. I'm supposed to say allegedly, but it's pretty clear with what's been brought before the jury that he indeed did all of that. However, the question is, does that mean he is guilty of murder? You see, my friend, you may have been pulled over for speeding, but that does not mean you were the person responsible for hitting a pedestrian across town while you were speeding in another area. In fact, my friend, it also can work the opposite. You see, in a small southern town, some years ago, I became aware that they had a trustee working in and around the jail, out working with a work crew, and I was pretty well amazed. As a young deputy, I was amazed that this one county was using a trustee out there that was actually convicted of murder. That's right, he had been convicted of murder. The sheriff of that county, though, he took me aside and explained it this way. He said, you see, that man could be trusted more than the others where he had them working. He went on to explain that this man killed another man in the heat of the moment. He had found that his wife was having an affair with that man, and he killed him in the heat of passion. Sheriff went on to say, in all probability, he will never, ever kill again. But then he said, on the other hand, a thief who comes in and out of jail for stealing, well, that thief, he'll probably steal again. So the murderer in that situation could be trusted over the thief. Well, at least that's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? But the question is, with the prosecution sharing the fact that he stole millions of dollars from people, will that lead the jury to convict him of murdering his wife and son? Now, there are many that are studying the trial, many who work in the criminal justice system. Well, they're thinking that just maybe the prosecutors are clouding the minds of the jurors, muddying the water, if you please, and may confuse the jury to the point that the jury could have reasonable doubt that would lead them to convict him, Alex, of murder. You see, now they're presenting this evidence to say that this is the motive for his murders. You see, they're saying that the financial crimes he committed, well, that those crimes are coming home to roost, and that he killed his wife and son to get sympathy from people and to take the spotlight off of his financial misconduct or financial crimes. Now, please keep in mind, the prosecution does not have to prove a murder to get a conviction. It's just that most juries like to see their case tied up neatly in a ribbon, and often that ribbon, that tie that ties it together, well, it's usually the motive. However, I guess I'm pretty well thinking the prosecution might be doing an overkill here, excuse the pun. You see, they're spinning all sorts of information that's not altogether simple to follow for some, including probably some of those that are on the jury. You see, I think they could do the same. They could still introduce that without throwing so much. Too much sometimes makes it boring. And remember, juries, they like simple stories that make sense. Hey, what do you think? Maybe the prosecution should spend a little more time with the KISS method, don't you think? You remember that, right? KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid. What do you think? If you've been following the trial, do you think that they are actually throwing too much at the jury? Let me know. You can reach me again. Shout out to me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Reach out with a shout out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Now next, there was a whole lot of hoopla, well, about the fact that two of the witnesses had set up, or at least one, had set up a GoFundMe page. This was in case they lost their job for testifying against Murdaugh. In fact, over $20,000 had been raised, and it appears that one of the prosecutors or somebody working in the office there had donated to that fund. Now, the defense, well, all that's being objected to. Then, as if there were not enough drama in the courtroom, well, hey, again, you can't make this up. One of the family members was moved to the back of the courtroom because he was, quote, unquote, giving the finger to one of the witnesses testifying against his dad. Yep, a whole lot of spinning parts in this trial, even more in this case, and just more to take the jury away from the real evidence that they should be looking at, that should really be used to bring conviction in the trial. Now, to be sure, it would be difficult to make this a simple case. And in a moment, I want to share with you some background of the case that not only points to the murder and shooting of his wife and son, but additional charges of manslaughter, attempted manslaughter, and even maybe another murder. And I want to share that with you in a moment. But right now, Right now, we're going to take a quick break and give you our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. And it's only fitting. Believe it or not, it happened again at an Arby's restaurant. That's right, an Arby's restaurant. Now, my friend, this is not a commercial for Arby's, although I do love their roast beef sandwiches. But here is our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. Now, my friend, if you are a drunk driver, well, let me encourage you, don't go to Arby's. That's right, a few weeks ago at an Arby's in White Lake Township, Michigan, well, there was a woman. She came through the drive-thru. The assistant manager, though, noticed that she smelled of vodka and liquor. Then she noticed that in the back seat of that truck, well, there was a little child. And the assistant manager, Bobby Longus there, she pretended that they were waiting on curly fries to be prepared for the person in the drive-thru. But during that time, she promptly called 911. Police came. They found that driver drunk and asleep in the drive-thru lane with open bottles of alcohol. Well, naturally, she was arrested. And my friend, it turns out Arby's employees have probably saved quite a few lives this year. In May, a similar story played out at an Arby's in Birmingham, Alabama. There, a woman had a 2-year-old in her car. And in January, Arby's called the police on another drunk guy in a truck in Cleveland, Ohio. All these restaurant workers, the ones that people threaten, the one that people shout at, curse at, well, there's some good ones out there that apparently are saving lives. Now, some of you may think these restaurant workers ought to mind their own business. But my friend, remember, there are innocent children out there who are in danger because their no good parents are drinking and driving with them in the car. So yes, it took courage. It took courage to get involved, and these restaurant workers who called the police on drunk drivers with small children in the car, well, in my opinion, my friend, they are our courageous citizens of the week. So back to our main focus, where lives are not being saved, but rather lives are being taken. You see, it may interest you to know that there are more deaths relating to this family. We're going to take a look at those deaths and how they may or may not impact this trial. Now, remember, he's on trial for shooting his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul. They're alleging that he murdered them. But before this, Alex's son, Paul, his son, Paul, who was killed, shot to death, Paul was actually facing his own charges. You see, back in February 2019, there was a boat crash, and a young lady, Mallory Beach, was killed. Others were injured. You see, Paul Murdaugh, he was among 6 people on board a sea hunt boat. Incidentally, that boat was owned by Alex Murdaugh. He was on board when it crashed into a bridge near Archer's Creek on February the 23rd, 2019. And Mallory Beach, she went into the water. Her body, by the way, was not recovered until a week later. Now, according to police reports, the boat occupants were grossly intoxicated there at the night of the crash. And Paul Murdaugh, who was 19 at the time, he was charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence. By the way, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. He was awaiting trial at the time of his death. And, of course, after that, civil lawsuits followed that boat crash. Shortly after Mallory Beach's death, Beach's family, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Alex Murdaugh. His oldest son, Richard, who allegedly provided Paul with a driver's license to purchase the alcohol under the legal age, and also Gregory Parker and Parker's Corporation. That was a convenience store chain that allegedly sold the alcohol to the minor. Now, that suit was also amended in February 2022, that's 3 years after Beach's death, also to include the estates of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. And now they are alleging in that lawsuit that Murdaugh's parents condoned the underage drinking that led to the crash. And there were additional civil suits that were filed by Anthony Cook, Beach's boyfriend at the time of the death, as well as Connor Cook. Well, my friend, what does all that mean about the trial? Well, now, it appears that the judge will now allow questions about that boating incident into the murder trial of Alex. You see, as the courtroom proceedings continue, the The county judge, well, he's going to allow questions related to that fatal 2019 boat crash. You see, the judge, Clifton Newman, he ruled Thursday that the testimony, while not directly related to the deaths of Paul and Maggie in June 2021, well, he did say that these things will be allowed. And here's how he said he made the decision. He said it comes from the Wednesday afternoon cross-examination of two of Paul's friends, Rogan Gibson, Will Loving. The judge said because they were cross-examined about that, well, they said that opened the door to discuss the crash. He went on to say, quote, "You have opened the door to the state to respond by asking questions." That's what Murdaugh's attorney, Jim Griffin, was. So that opened the door for the state to address the issue. So now that brings us back. How will this boating accident in which his son Paul was a driver of a boat while he was intoxicated, how will that help convict Alex Murdaugh of murdering his wife and his son? Well, again, it paints the defendant in a bad way before the jury. Or could it be? Could it be, and I'm asking the question again and again in this podcast, that this is even more of an overload of information that will confuse the jury? And my friend, as if that isn't enough, well, hang on to your hat. There's yet another death tied to this trial. You see, Alex Murdaugh's housekeeper, Miss Satterfield, you see, she slipped and fell down the stairs, tripped over the dogs, it's alleged, died after being in a coma. That was back in 2018. However, my friend, this too will impact the trial because some of the financial crime that's been allowed into the murder trial, well, it relates to that incident. Because you see now, after Satterfield's funeral, the housekeeper who died from that fall, tripping over the dogs, allegedly, well, Murdaugh, Alex, he told her sons he was going to take care of them. He agreed to pay them $500,000 after suing, now get this, suing himself to collect on personal liability insurance. Now, isn't it strange to think that somebody's going to take people to an attorney and tell that attorney, "I want you to sue me"? Well, hang on, listen closely. That attorney that he was going to take them to sue himself, well, unbeknown to the Satterfield family, that attorney was Alex's college roommate and his best friend, a guy by the name of Corey Fleming. You see, Murdaugh also allegedly appointed non-family member Chad Westendorf as Satterfield's personal representative in the negotiations, and that was without the son's knowledge. And my friend, you do that so you don't have to keep the family informed of what's going on. So settlements started happening, but nobody's telling the family anything about it. They never found it out. The only reason they found that had already been settled and money had already been paid out to that lawsuit was because reporters, well, they started digging after Pauls was arrested for that drunk boating accident. So at the end of 2020, well, Satterfield's family, they say, wait a minute. You're telling us that the claim was already settled for $505,000? Well, we didn't get any of that money. Then it gets even crazier. You see, they thought they were due money on the $500,000 payout. Well, now we know, my friend, the rest of the story, and that is this. Multiple insurers actually paid out, get this, not $500,000, but $4 million to Fleming. And Satterfield's family in that wrongful death suit, they never saw one dime of it. Yep, this is the financial crimes that Alex Murdaugh was involved in. Did a deal with his attorney friend, sued himself over the death of the housekeeper. Didn't give any money to the family of the housekeeper, but instead, he and his lawyer friend, they pocketed it all, $4 million. Now, as if that wasn't enough, remember last week I also shared with you how Alex orchestrated his own shooting, which he survived. That was an attempt to leave his son Buster with $10 million in insurance cash. So there's yet another layer to this twisted story. Again, I say, my friend, you cannot make this stuff up. Now, in fact, attorney that's representing the family, Miss Satterfield, well, now they're suing the Murdaugh family. And he said this, and I think he's right on target here. The attorney for Satterfield's family, they said it's hard to believe that one family can create this kind of turmoil. That's what Eric Bland said about the mess. He said greed, power, betrayal. He said all the bad things. He actually referred to it. He said it's like a Grisham novel. Only Grisham doesn't have to write fiction. He can just come to South Carolina and write the truth. And that lawsuit was filed, another one on Wednesday, and it also prompted officials to get this, to open an investigation on her death. You see, there are many of those who are thinking that investigation into the death of the housekeeper who allegedly tripped over the dogs, well, maybe she just might not have tripped over the dogs and fell down the steps. Maybe, just maybe it might be another murder that Alex Murdaugh is charged with. So the plot thickens, but as I've said all along, is this over the limit of what the jury can follow? Will this muddy the water to the point that it raises reasonable doubt? You see, all of this I've shared, well, it does not really count for evidence on the murder of his wife, Maddie, and his son, Paul. You see, real evidence is that evidence like you might find on the computer of Alex's vehicle that would put him at the scene of the murders when he said he was not there. But will this real evidence, will it lose its value in light of the overabundance of evidence that Alex committed the financial crimes? Will the jury say, well, they easily proved the financial crimes, but they're very short of the evidence of murder? You see, this is the chance that the prosecution has taken with this jury. This overwhelming information they're showing to the jury. It's just like almost they're throwing paint on the wall, hoping that enough will stick to show the jury what a bad man Alex Murdaugh is. Yes, he did rob from his clients. He robbed from his family. He robbed from his friends. But did he kill his wife and his son? You see, even those who testified, some of them have said under oath that Alex appeared to love his wife and his family. Will the prosecution be able to prove that this man turned from a financial crook to a cold-blooded killer of his own wife and son? Well, I got to tell you, folks, at this point in the trial, I'm not convinced that the prosecution is proving their case to the point of a reasonable doubt. You see, I think they're confusing the jury. Now, I will admit there's more time to present more evidence. But have they already turned off the jury? Have they already overloaded the jury? And remember, the defense yet has not put their own case on. The defense will now come and combat the case with their own information. Well, here's my grade and take on it as far as the prosecution is concerned. As far as proving he's a financial crook, well, they get an A+ there. They have done that more and abundantly done that. But as far as proving that he murdered his son and his wife, well, in that area, I'm going to have to give him a D, not an A, not an A+, but a D, maybe even a D-. Not enough, in my opinion, for conviction. We're going to see that in the next few weeks, though, if they can improve that D- to maybe at least an A. If they can get it to an A, then they will get a conviction. We're just going to have to wait and see. Well, lessons to be learned. Well, one at least is that you'd never write to drink and drive. You see, as a road deputy, I felt I was not only doing my job, but I was saving lives and taking drunk drivers off the road. I've seen too many people killed as a result of irresponsible drunk drivers. And in this case, Alex's son was responsible for the death of a young lady because he was piloting a boat under the influence. You see, people killed in boating accidents just like in car accidents because of alcohol, drinking, and driving. Every year, hundreds are killed, thousands are injured. Many of those on the water is alcohol-related. So don't drink and drive, and don't boat and drink. You can save lives. Now the next lesson to be learned, again, is to keep your family close. Your loved ones or my loved ones, they could become a victim of a drunk driver, or even a victim of murder, as in this case. And sometimes it will happen when it's least expected. So love and express that love to the people in your life. And while you're at it, my friend, be alert, be safe, teach them to be alert and to be safe. For my friend, the life you save may be your